For centuries, we have built our systems around a single, highly intuitive idea. Mass equals security. You build a thick wall, you absorb whatever hits it, and you survive. But in highly complex environments, a wall doesn't actually stop stress. It just hides the stress, right up until the moment it shatters into dust. For about 400 years, global strategy was dominated by this concept. It's called fortress thinking. Sovereignty meant maintaining a static perimeter. If you held the territory, you won. If your walls were breached, you lost. The world's most critical systems, finance, energy, and communications, now operate in a condition of permanent instability. Disruptions are no longer deviations from the norm. They are continuous, overlapping features of the landscape itself. This map shows the 2025 Iberian power grid. A French overvoltage event propagated across the interconnect, cutting power to 55 million people in 5 seconds. The system collapsed because, lacking predefined separation boundaries, the localized fault instantly propagated across the entire rigidly connected peninsula. When systems are deeply interconnected, building a thicker wall to absorb force actually creates a more brittle structure. Relying on inflexible mass as your primary defense is exactly what guarantees a catastrophic failure. Surviving this kind of systemic risk requires an inversion of how we approach strategy. We have to stop calculating our strength based on firepower and start optimizing for flow. We call this flow sovereignty. It is the capacity to maintain the continuous movement of authority, information, and energy through a network, even while that network is actively being disrupted. In the old model, victory was determined by the physical ground you held. Today, power is determined by the essential flows you can preserve when the infrastructure around you is severed. This illustrates strategic jujitsu. Instead of throwing defensive resources at a breach to freeze the network, like the fortress failure on the left, you use the disruption's momentum to trigger a pre-planned rerouting of resources, leaving a surviving, islanded core on the right. To pull that off, a system has to be intentionally architected to sacrifice its own peripheral limbs to save its vital organs. This diagram shows 4 traditions making resilience possible. First, graceful degradation, engineering systems to fail partially. Second, islanding, detaching subnetworks to maintain balance. Third, commander's intent, pushing decision-making downward. And fourth, cyberocracy, distributed governance defeating hierarchies. Combine these into an engineering blueprint. A system that recognizes a catastrophe, automatically severs its vulnerable connections, and keeps its core alive. The 72-hour survival metric dictates strict triage. The top red line represents Tier 0 pivot dominoes, like a water network, which must maintain full capacity to prevent cascade. At the bottom, peripheral nodes enter safe failure mode, instantly crashing to 0 to conserve resources. Survivability requires this kind of pre-calculated triage, the ruthless decision of exactly what to sacrifice so the state can endure that critical 72-hour window. But there is a fatal flaw in relying entirely on the structure of a digital mesh. To see it, look at the collapse of the Afghan state. On paper, their security forces were built as a highly capable, decentralized mesh military. Yet in August 2021, a system that absorbed over $2 trillion in international investment disintegrated in exactly 11 days. This diagram illustrates the coordination paradox. Decentralization naturally resists an attack from the outside. But if those distributed local nodes are hollow, driven by personal survival rather than shared purpose, the system will shatter from a profound lack of internal institutional coherence. A technical mesh does not automatically generate resilience. It simply amplifies the existing behaviors, flaws, and integrity of the human operators running it. This graphic shows what actually keeps a decentralized system intact, a red human network layered directly over the technical circuit board. We measure this through institutional loan density, the accumulated ethical tradition that allows human operators to resist extreme stress without structural deformation. When a system lacks that density, it suffers from hierarchy addiction. Operators become culturally paralyzed, terrified to act without explicit top-down authorization. When the center goes dark, the nodes freeze, and the mesh instantly shatters. This requires abandoning the obsolete fortress commander, the leader who demands vertical obedience, and replacing them with a new archetype, the sovereign weaver. The sovereign weaver's job isn't to dictate actions or own the network. Their job is to cultivate lateral trust and clearly translate intent so that when a crisis hits, local nodes know exactly how to act autonomously under pressure. This brings us to the Horizon 2050 architecture, detailed in this diagram. As we move towards sovereign by design, autonomous AI systems will execute graceful degradation naturally, but as the 5 architectural safeguards show, they still require cryptographically verified human oversight to prevent subversion. Modern sovereignty depends on the capacity to govern through disruption, rather than attempting to prevent it through static defense.